Hi, my name's Dan, and this video is the first in a short series of videos that I'm doing, which will show getting started with Unreal Engine 5. And in this video, I just want to talk about what the Unreal Engine is. I think most people who are engaging with this sort of thing know what it is, or at least have a basic understanding of what a games engine is and what it can do. But I might as well just spend a few minutes talking about where Unreal Engine has come from, what it is, and what its, in a broad sense, what its capabilities are. So it's software that's been created by Epic, who are a games company. So historically, this is about graphics. Obviously, games have been around for quite a while now. Way back in the early days of games, when you were making a game, you had to do all your own graphics stuff, and you had to do all the calculations for the rendering, which is pretty maths heavy, and it takes quite a lot of processing, doing all these kind of fancy stuff that you can see on the screen now. This is quite modern capabilities. This is all done using maths and numbers. And after a while, games companies found that it seemed to be a bit of a waste of effort to reinvent that every time they created a game. So they started to create a separate component of that, which was called the graphics engine. So that was the bit that would do the rendering for you. And then they would use that engine for possibly several games. And then you got into the situation where they were reusing it, but they kept updating it as the graphics capabilities kept getting better. And over time, this became a thing where actually, if you've got a decent graphics engine, why not sell it to other companies? And so some companies bought in a graphics engine or used one from a friendly company and paid them some royalties for using it. And this is kind of where the Unreal Engine has come from, is that it was made for use for making games at Epic. And then they started making it more freely available, and actually it just became more and more freely available as time went on. This makes a lot of sense, because these graphics capabilities are quite advanced now, and it's quite a specialist job to be able to do this kind of programming. But also is expanded out from just the graphics. So the Unreal Engine does far more than just rendering. So it gives you support for, as well as other things, the rendering, but control handling and physics and scripting for game rules, character animation, enemy AI, network play, interface elements, all sorts of visual effects, all sorts of things going on. And in fact, at this point in time, I would say that it's pretty mature, and it's very widely used, and it's pretty large in scope. It's become quite a huge piece of software. But with that complexity comes a lot of versatility and a lot of power to be able to do all sorts of things with it. So I'm going to move on now from just showing you their kind of promo video and go into the Epic Games Launcher. So you can get the Unreal Engine for free if you're a hobbyist, if you're an individual using it, if you're a student who wants to use it. In fact, you only ever need to pay for it once you start making money out of games or out of the other applications that you might create through it yourself. So they've got a variety of ways of doing licensing, but for most of the people that I end up talking to, it's free, basically, and you can download it from that website where I've just been, which is Epic. They insist pretty much that the way into the Unreal Engine is to download and install the Epic Games Launcher, which is what you can see in front of you now. And this has access to all sorts of things, but in particular, I'm just using it for the Unreal Engine. And I've got different versions up here. So I'm currently working on getting to grips with 5.1.1, which is the most recent version. I've got a whole lot of projects. It tells me which version they've been made with. You can see I've done quite a lot just on this computer, and I've got other computers with lots of projects on as well. So these are past projects, and if you just want to load up the editor, you click one of these to launch the particular version of the editor you want. Right, so let's go and show the editor itself, which kind of looks like this. What it gives you is, this is the kind of home, as it were, of the Unreal Engine for editing. It's called the level editor, and the next video after this one in the sequence, I'm going to explore this level editor in much more detail. There are just loads of editors in here and loads of things that you can do. I'm just going to quickly flick through some of the ones that I probably use most. So I'm going to start at this end. This is the static mesh editor. So this is for editing and doing stuff with 3D models. This is the materials editor. So for this is about the details of rendering the surface. And you can see there's a predominant theme that you get with these kind of graphical nodes and wires kind of interfaces with Unreal. Here's what's called a blueprint. So this is a blueprint editor, and a blueprint is a way of putting together objects that you can see on the screen and behavior. And so this is a little thing that I've just been putting together. It's got 3 components, and we've got some. We actually haven't got any behavior on this, but this would give us more scripts for that. You've got a behavior tree editor. So I've just done a very quick one that doesn't actually do anything. This is how you edit. Use the Unreal AI system in there. And what's next across here? We've got a widget blueprint. So this is about interface stuff. So for HUDs and other interface elements. And we've got, the last one I've got here is a sound cue editor. So this is to do with the sound elements. And we'll, if you go through these series of videos that I'm doing, you'll meet some of these along the way. I'm not at the moment intending to dive deep into the sound or into the materials, but there's more as well. So there's particle effects, there's character animation, there's rigging. The list just seems to keep expanding. Whenever I find a list epic, I seem to think, seem to find that there are some that don't seem to be on the list as well, because there's legacy ones still in there that you can get to, and all sorts of stuff going on. Right, so not much left to say. I'm nearly done. So this is free for hobbyists, as I've said. We're now in version 5.1. My current version is 5.1.1. The interesting thing about the Unreal Engine, or one thing I found interesting, is how much it is starting to be used in non-games fields. So obviously it's quite a big thing in the games industry to use the Unreal Engine, but there are all sorts of simulation and visualization companies, engineering companies, medical simulation, all sorts of things going on that are starting to use the Unreal Engine, because people want to be able to visualize things in 3D space, increasingly so. So this is a huge growth area for Unreal. There are a few things that I would say that Unreal is not great at. I've not done much trying to get it to do 2D, and it's not, from my little experience, it's not as easy to do that as it is in its direct competitor, which is Unity. It's not particularly good at making getting into the code straightforward. So you can use the Unreal Engine using C++. In fact, most once you get beyond a certain level, most games companies are doing that. But the entry to that is a little complicated. In fact, in general, I would say that it's not great at simplicity, and that's because it's so big and so versatile. And versatility and complexity pretty much seem to go hand in hand a lot of the time. It's not great about using consistent terms for things across the board. It's not hugely bad, but there are times when it can be frustrating. So, for example, the thing that we're looking here is a thing that in some places they call a level, and in some places they call a map, and in some places they call a world. And I'm not sure if they have subtle distinctions between these three things. And this is, this occurs in other places as well. You find the kind of flipping between terms somewhat in a cavalier fashion. It's occasionally it has some fairly confusing crashes and errors. It is pretty stable, to be honest, and it's more when you're editing rather than when you're actually trying to play the game that you have these problems. And sometimes things just go weird, and the only sensible thing to do is to try turning it off and on again, is to kind of either restart the editor, which sometimes solves it, and if that doesn't solve it, sometimes if it's a small project, just restarting again from scratch because something's gone wrong somewhere. There's so much going on, and sometimes it's hard to find where things have gone wrong. Text file handling, it doesn't do natively easily. There is a load game and a save game function, but any kind of approach to try and do a game that's got external configuration, you need to plug into either doing something yourself to make that happen or getting a plug-in to make that happen. It's not great in terms of avoiding project bloat. A lot of small projects get very big very quickly, especially if you're bringing in asset packs. I always hesitate to say it can't do anything because it just might be I've not discovered how because it's so big. But it seems to be difficult to strip out unused assets from a project. And I've also found sometimes it's a bit confusing. Their documentation online is generally is very good. They've got a lot to document, I have to admit. Sometimes knowing where you are and knowing where you can go and knowing what's available is somewhat confusing. I did mention plugins briefly earlier. I'm just going to try and remember if I can find the plugins here. So there are all sorts of expansions that you can get for the editor to use, and I mentioned using text, for example. So I'm using a file handling plugin wherever that's gone. File helper, here we go. So I've plugged in, this is a third-party plugin. Most of these plugins are actually Epic plugins, and they tend to, when they start to have experimental features that they may be thinking in the future of building into the engine, full, kind of permanently as part of the engine, they often will produce them as a plugin first and get people to test them, which is quite a smart thing to do. So that hopefully gives you an idea of what the Unreal Engine is and some of the big broad outline of what its capabilities are. Over the rest of this series, short series of videos, I'm going to be exploring using this editor and how to make some very simple basics of 3D scenes, how to navigate it, how to manipulate things inside there. So that's it from me for now.